Hello Wes, Ross here from Britain's in History. Beautiful backdrop of Roath Park Lake. And I'll be reading from this book here, which is King Arthur, King of Glamorgan and Gwent. And so start at the beginning, the written evidence in the histories, looking at the records that we can look at. When we set out on the trail of Arthur, the first point to notice is that there is a surprising quantity of written evidence available on early Britain, if you know where to look. The bulk is contained in the books 4 and 5 of De Bello Gallico, The War in Gaul by Julius Caesar. Then there's the life of Agricola, governor of Britain, by Tacitus, and other histories by Tacitus, with additional comments in the works of Pliny and other Roman authors. Caesar wrote in 55 and 54 BC, Tacitus around 97 to 98 AD, Pliny wrote his Natural History with a chapter on Britain, dedicating the work to the Emperor Titus in 77 AD. Then Diodorus wrote of Britain in 50 BC also. In the next 3 centuries, we have to seek odd pieces of information in the works of the Christian writers, Origen and Tertullian, around 200 AD, and Greek historian Zosimus. The works of Xiphilin also deal obliquely with the British, and Strabo describes their chieftains. The near neighbour nations in Gaul were described by Florus, Paulus, Orosius, and again by Poisonius, apud, Athenaeum. Later in AD 361, in the reign of Julian, clear word pictures of Gauls were drawn by a shrewd, unbiased observer, Amancinus Marcellinus XV, 12-1. Florus describes the chiefs, Plutarch vividly describes their cavalry, and so did Polybius, 1 and 2. In Britain itself, the next full attempt at a description or history of any sort after Tacitus was to be made by the monk Gildas, who wrote a book entitled The Destruction of Britain, or De Excidio Britannia, which from its content can be dated to between 533 AD and 547 AD, that is, during the reign of Arthur and before the death of King Maelgwn Gwynedd. The work of Gildas concerned the history of Britain from the time of the Romans down to the date of his writing the book. Gildas was a contemporary of the great Arthur. He is mentioned in the Mabinogion tales as Gildas, son of Cow, present at Arthur's court and camp, and he was active in South Wales, which was Arthur's home territory. In fact, Gildas spent much time at the Llancarfan Monastery College, possibly also at Llantwitt Major Monastery College, and a great deal of time on the island of the Steep Holm in the Bristol Channel of Cardiff. He also had a recorded meeting with King Arthur at Llancarfan after Arthur killed Gildas's brother Hueil. The tragedy of Gildas' account is that it is not a cold, impartial, reasoned history. It is in fact more of a political document, deliberately designed to stir men and to move them away from their current policies and activities into a new way of living and cooperating. In addition, he was a man who burned with a fanatical religious zeal, a monk who was ascetic to the point of being masochistic in his way of life. He is therefore a dangerous source of commentary on the age of Arthur, as much capable of exaggerating, misleading and distorting as he is of guiding and explaining. So whilst the bald facts stated by Gildas are of great value, the interpretation of those facts or events may be generally totally wrong and misguided. Gildas is believed to have been born around 516 AD and died around 570 AD. The next writer to produce a history of the Britons was Nennius, again a monk who trained under a bishop named Elbod. The bishop Elbodogus is twice referred to in the Welsh annals. First, when he is stated to have reformed a method of calculating the date for Easter in 768 AD. Elbodogus, Archbishop of the Kingdom of Gwynedd, departed to God, is a quote. This helps to date Nennius as a student under Elbodogus, and there is one of the manuscript copies of the work of Nennius made in the 13th century, a note faithfully copied out which reads, quotes, "Therefore the work is written in order to assist my inferiors and not through any envy of my superiors, was written in the year 858 of the incarnation of our Lord. Again, as with Gildas, the scene is in Wales, and this time it is an attempt at history drawing on the Bible of the Christians, starting from Adam and the flood, and divided into 6 sections or ages. Much of the early work is therefore fabulous, but with grains of truth, including the British origins in the Asia Minor, which he confuses hopelessly, the Irish, brackets the Scots, origins in Spain, and the coming of the Picts, the Orkneys, and then into northern Britain. He also mentions the Scythians, who were in Egypt at the time of the Jewish Exodus, who refused to go east after the Jews with the Hittite Pharaoh, and instead turned west along North Africa to finally come through Spain and to Britain and Ireland. In this he is correct. Later we have more firm ground with accounts of 3 Roman invasions to establish Roman power and 3 later expeditions to restore it. He, Nennius, is clearly drawing on Gildas at this stage, but then comes something very different, with no less than 17 chapters on King Carthaginius, or Vortigern. The Saxon infiltrations and their struggles with the British are described with the story of Hengist and Horsa, the massacre of the Picts and the Scots of Ireland with their savage, sneak raids, and the threat of Ambrosius from Devon and Cornwall are described. After the downfall of Vortigern, there is brief mention of St. Germanus and Patrick, and then, without warning, the history launches into the battles and wars of the victorious Arthur. Nennius clearly drew on Gildas, the Bible as well, and on the Welsh annals, yet his history reveals that he must have had other sources, long since vanished. After Arthur, Nennius turns to Saxon affairs and deals with the ancestral lists of the kings of the various Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. This section appears to have northern, therefore Northumbrian, sources, and the wars of the Britons and the Angles are described. At the same time approaches Nennius's own years. The entries become both more detailed, more frequent and more accurate. So there are in fact 7 distinct pieces which go together to make Nennius's work. First, he uses Gildas and other sources to describe a geography of Britain. Second, he draws on folklore and legend to describe the legend of the origin of the Britons, the Picts and the Scots. Third, he produces a brief account of the Roman invasion, which is a muddle of folklore and fact. Fourth, he includes a typical life of St. Germanus, well in line with many other such lives. Fifth, he describes at length the reign of Vortigern from sources which appear to have been well remembered or well recorded. Sixth, he describes and lists the battles of King Arthur, which again details, which indicate a good contemporary source. Seventh, there is the account of the later wars in the north of England between the Britons and the Angles. Some of the surviving copies of manuscript copied from Nennius list the marvels of Britain, de Mirabilibus Britanniae, at the end of the history of the Britons. These link Arthur and the Truth, the boar hunt of the Mabinogion story, and also demonstrate the maps of the time were drawn with the east coast of Britain on the top and the south coast on the right hand side. This helps in understanding of Roman naming of provinces in Britain, superior upper and inferior lower, and so on. We have therefore 2 linked sources for the history of Britain up to the beginning of the 8th century. Both mention Arthur, and there is the onset of confusion, with Nennius describing Urien as fighting with Hueil in Northumbria, who became king there in 585, and had also been slain at the time of Theodoric, who is recorded as dying in 579 AD. Urien-Urbgen is of course the Sir Urien of the Arthurian Romance literature, and believed to be Arthur's brother-in-law. Nennius goes on to describe the conversion of King Edwin of Northumbria to the Orthodox Christian faith in 626 AD, the swallowing up of British Elemet, a kingdom near Leeds, by Northumbria, and then on to the wars of Cadwallon, ending the section with the death of King Penda, son of Pubba of Mercia, sometime after his victories culminating in the Battle of Cockboy, Winwidfeld in 654 AD. It is with Nennius and with Gildas that we first learn of the origins of the British coming from out of the centre of Asia, crossing or rounding the Mediterranean to finally arrive and settle in a great island.